All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is a follow-up to the IFA panel that was hosted during the IFA convention regarding virtual restaurants, disruption or distraction. We're very happy that there was a lot of positive feedback from that session, and people requested a follow-up to ask more questions of our esteemed panelists. So we are very fortunate that we've been able to put the band back together, so as it were, this afternoon to answer any follow-up questions that arose from our session last week. I will tell you that the session title, Virtual Restaurants, Disruption or Distraction, ? Was resoundingly answered as in disruption, definitely not distraction. So that was the conclusion that was reached overwhelmingly and unanimously from our session last time. And we're really excited to be able to further our discussion there and answer more questions today. So a couple of housekeeping comments. All attendees should keep their webcams turned off and audio muted. We will be using the chat feature to take questions. So please do put your questions into the chat and put it to everyone, so it's easy for everyone to see what your question is. And then feel free to network and connect with the other attendees in the chat box at any time that you want to. So this is a bit of an interactive session. So without further ado, I'd like to now start with a quick recap of panel introductions. And so I'll start with Ashley Tran. Ashley, would you like to say a few words about yourself and your background?
Yeah, definitely. And I love the bringing the band back together. So I think of myself as the keyboardist in this. I'm Ashley. I'm a director of merchant strategy and operations at DoorDash, and my team leads the strategy and work in all things that are not a traditional brick and mortar. So virtual brands, virtual concepts, commissary kitchens. I think last time we talked about how many different definitions and permutations there are of this. So my team's focus is on how do we help merchants grow in this space, and what's our role in this space.
Wonderful, thank you, Ashley. Barry?
Thank you, glad to be here again. I'm with Coca-Cola, work in our global customer commercial area, where I lead customer marketing and digital growth, working with restaurant customers and others, and also lead our future of commerce practice, where certainly dark kitchens, ghost kitchens are a big part of the growth path ahead, no question about it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Rishi?
Yeah, I lead the efforts at Franklin Junction. We're a digital platform that allows restaurants to add incremental revenue opportunities through delivery-only concepts, as well as offering services to manage incumbent operations on the digital platforms as well. And happy to be back and answer some questions.
Great. And Jeff?
Hi, thank you. My name is Jeff Alexander. I'm the president and CEO of WowBow, a quick serve fast casual Asian concept that from April of 2020 through today, we have about 220 locations across the country serving our product via third-party delivery with restaurant partners, hotel partners, and catering partners.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm your host today, as I was during the last time. My name is Aziz Hashim. I'm the general partner of NRD Capital. We are a middle market private equity firm that specializes in franchising and franchise-related activities. We own a number of franchise brands, as well as investments in a number of technologies relating to how to make life for franchisees easier and make them more money. So I'm glad to be back here. And so we've got the panel together. We've got a good number of attendees that are in the session today. So please enter any questions you have in the chat so we can begin answering those follow-up questions for you. So while we wait for some questions to come in, well, here comes one right now. So Jeff, question directly for you. Are there any patterns in terms of the types of restaurant concepts get the rest of it, that are adopting your offering, size and type of cuisine? In other words, where does WowBow seem to be finding its audience?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we offer Chinese, basically we're Chinese food, right? Asian buns, pot stickers, rice bowls. So we have a low comp set. So we basically fit in with just about anybody because in most regions outside of high urban, there's not a lot of Asian for us to be up against. We are working with mom and pops, and we're working with enterprise accounts. We have some people who have a single unit, and we have some groups we're working with that have 40 or 50 units. So we're seeing it across the board, as well as in hotels and as well as catering companies. So there really isn't a strict demographic or type of partner that we're working with. And we see the great success in non-urban areas, more smaller markets than larger markets. And again, I think that has to do because of the smaller competitive set that we play against.
Great, thank you. And as a follow-up to that, actually, we talked a little bit about, but we didn't get much time to discuss it last time, about this notion of food deserts and vast parts of the country which don't have the privilege of having lots of interesting offerings because their market is just so small that it doesn't make sense. The independent restaurants would not be able to go out and open freestanding locations, but the advent of virtual restaurants allows for concepts like Wow Bao and many others to get into some of these smaller markets where brick and mortar development would just not be feasible. Can you say a little bit about that from DoorDash's point of view and how you facilitate those type of activities?
Yeah, I think that, you really talked about a critical piece around helping to provide great selection for consumers. And that is particularly in places where there isn't a lot of selection. So that includes smaller markets that maybe don't have the breadth of restaurants that we would see, say, I'm in San Francisco. The selection is really tremendous here. So adding something incremental like Wow Bao could really help. There may not be a ton in that cuisine category. I think for us, what we're also seeing is successful is not just the types of cuisine, but other gaps in the market, if you will. So day part is a really big one. I'm sure that a hotel that's open until 1 or 2 a.m. that's offering Wow Bao is going to do great volume because there are very few options late at night. And it's not just that there are few options late at night. It's also that when you open up the app, you're going to see Wow Bao because there aren't a ton of things open. And so when you search, you get a lot of those results. So, for anyone who's thinking about if they should bring on a virtual brand, it's not just saying, okay, if we make it, they will come, but it is trying to say, what's the gap we're going to fill? Is it a day part gap? Is it a selection, like a cuisine gap? And try to hit that to help drive consistency.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question has come in. I'll read the question. I'm not sure I understand it completely, but the question says, do certain risks increase if the franchise location operates as a virtual kitchen? For example, is there potentially a bigger risk of territorial encroachment or reduction of profits by increased delivery fees? So Rishi, I'm going to punt this one to you. I think I understand the question that, I think maybe a multi-part question. One is, if franchise locations operate as virtual restaurants, does that create any undue problems for the franchise location and any kinds of encroachment issues vis-a-vis their franchisor? And is there a reduction of profits by increase of delivery fees? So I think those are two interesting questions that maybe you've got some perspective on because you deal with some franchisees at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll answer the first part as we understand it, which is that franchisors certainly have to respect the territories that they have issued out or sold to franchisees. And so that there is a balance there with where you decide to develop. And if those are territories that are potentially encroaching onto existing franchisee locations. So very valid question. A platform like ours, and I would reckon to say that anybody else in a similar position would work very closely with a franchisor to evaluate each location and see if that's one that makes sense and is open for development. And on the second level, I would say that locations that you're developing in a delivery only or a virtual space are typically because it doesn't make sense to build a store there. So chances are you do not have a brick and mortar location there. So again, it's a little bit of a different situation, but I don't think anybody has a license to just go put a location anywhere they like or potentially encroach on a franchisee's territory. So the second one on the reduction of increased delivery fees. So my response to that would be that, we ended our session with talking about, the need state of customers, and that delivery offers an incremental sales opportunity that you're not otherwise capturing within your four walls. So the delivery fees are really offsetting a service for incremental revenue. I'll let Ashley answer to that too, but I don't think that delivery companies are making a ton of money, or any in some cases, off the delivery itself. But they are providing a service in terms of capturing a new sale for you that would not otherwise exist. And so, yes, there's a fee associated with that, but there's also a sale tied to it. I don't think it's cannibalizing any sale that you would otherwise have. Ashley, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's right. Is like to think about virtual brands as really driving incremental for you. And so if you're focused on the right concept, I think, again, I love to use WAB as an example because I think it's a clear example for so many of these restaurants. Is if it is differentiated, you really shouldn't be cannibalizing your sales, right? Like you're not offering the same necessarily food type or the same hours or whatever it might be. And so they should be net new customers who you wouldn't have necessarily been able to capture anyway.
Great. Yeah, I think this is that part of the discussion to me was the most intriguing when we had our original session, was the need state. Is if you are in a delivery mood, you don't want to get in your car and you don't want to go out. That is really, it should be an incremental sale. And I think back to when delivery was not so ubiquitous. What did we do when we felt like that? Well, pizza was the easy answer because they were the only ones really doing delivery, or your local Chinese restaurant. And other than that, you were sort of forced to cook yourself or make some other arrangements because you just weren't going to go out right now. It was not, you're not in a position to go out at the moment. So to me, the online opportunity for restaurants is a completely, I think, expanded opportunity. It's a bigger ocean here, and we're giving people an option to go get food. So I think that's a really important point, that we shouldn't confuse this as cannibalization. Is there going to be zero cannibalization? Maybe not. Maybe you would have gotten, put your coat on and gone outside and gone to a restaurant if delivery wasn't an option. But I think, generally speaking, our view is that that's a pretty small. The cannibalization effect is fairly small. I would also add, not that I'm an expert, and maybe Barry can chime in on this, but when delivery came in, I didn't see Target's sales go down or Walmart's sales go down. Right. Not really sure that delivery necessarily. That's not to say that there weren't some casualties of delivery, but in a sense that the customer that was willing to go to the department store still goes. But delivery added another dimension of getting products to them without having for them to go out. So that was a good part of the discussion. Several more questions have come in, so let's get right to them. We have a question about, can you provide general expectations around profitability? What can restaurants do to improve differentiate in terms of operations profitability? Barry, you had made some mention last time about some of the changes that restaurants can make in their thinking, and you'd mentioned about agility, for example. Maybe you want to chime in on this and how to make the most out of this e-commerce opportunity.
Yeah, sure. A couple of, I think, maturations we'll see with dark kitchens going forward, and some of this based on what's happening in China with Alibaba, Alipay, and that market, which is obviously very advanced, is one in terms of just capturing more users and engagement, but ultimately revenue, is live streaming. We'll definitely see, dark kitchens participate in live streaming and call it a cooking show. And there'll be significant interest for the brands that do this right. We're clearly seeing this in China now. I think secondly, looking further out, we're going to see scaled economics with automation. And it's easier in many ways to have automation with a dark kitchen. If you think about bowls and pizza and robotics, can play out easier there. I would say thirdly, we're likely potentially to see dark kitchens that specialize in fresh snacks, desserts, perhaps even beverages. And then I think there'll also be players that have more vertical integration throughout the dark kitchen, all the way through the value chain, which obviously presents a lot of opportunities. But, short answer in terms of like tomorrow, what you can do is, I think, when you're bringing something to the consumer that is personalized, on demand, and something they don't have in the office or home, is the high ground, whether that's the beverage, the dessert, or the food. And I think what Jeff is doing is a great example of that.
Wonderful.
Can I just chime in on that, please?
Sure, sure.
So with the question here about profitability and operations, the thing about a dark kitchen, the way I look at it is, you are doing X amount of sales in your building, doing X product. By bringing in a second or third, fourth, fifth, however many more concepts in, you really are not having the same amount of right? You're not having the overhead, because your main business is paying for your rent, your utilities, your management fees, whatever it may be. And it's not really costing you any additional cost to turn on the oven for an extra 10 minutes, or to turn on the steamer, or to run another piece of equipment, because the lights are on, the lights are on. So by bringing on a second concept or third concept, what Ashley said is, you're not going to compete with your own existing menu. You're going to create a different menu. And the way to do this, the success that you can have from this, is it's really only costing you food, and it's really only costing you packaging, and it's only costing you the third-party commission. What we've done with Wow Bao is we've created a menu that is a 36% food and packaging cost, that really has no labor involved with it, because our product is made for you. You're simply reheating it as an operator. Then you have your commissions, and we say an average of 25% is what we believe the commissions are. So that's 60%. You're dropping somewhere between 30 and 40% to the bottom line. And that's what you see with any dark kitchen you're turning on, or any virtual brand. The flow through is so much larger than your main business, because you don't have these other costs associated. The other thing is, to your question about growing sales and profitability, and Ashley could speak more to this because she's the expert, but we believe at Wow Bao, we encourage the operator to do in-app promotions. You have to find yourself to be visible on the apps. And there's two ways you get visibility on the apps. Because remember, you're not brick and mortar, you have no signage. The first is, you have to do a really good job operationally. Food has to be good, food has to be fast, drivers can't wait, right? The order acceptance, all the algorithmic base has to work, so you move up in the third-party app. Then you turn on offers, 20% off, free delivery, buy one, get one free. If you have 30 or 40 points to play with, you can give up 10 or 15%, because you're still making an incredible amount of profit. So that's how you grow this business, and that's how you need to treat it, as a business, not as a side gig that you have going on.
And I think that's where a lot of operators, they get the sticker shock on the fees and things of that nature. And, they lose sight of the bigger picture, which is, if it's an incremental sale, it's profitable. You've got 100 cents to work with. If whatever virtual restaurant you have installed in your facility has a food cost, you mentioned, Jeff, 36 in your case, right? But whatever that number is, if you add whatever the delivery fee is, but the fact that all of your fixed overheads are paid for, and usually there's not like I tell people, if you have to add labor in your virtual restaurant, that's a high quality problem to have. That means you're doing so much volume that you actually need to add a body, and until you need to add a body, you're doing great. And if you have to add a body, you're doing even better, so one gets confused about the fees only if you have a cannibalization mindset. But if it's a different need state, or if it's a different menu, in this case, you don't sell Wow Bao, you don't sell Chinese, and now you're selling Wow Bao, that's an additional sale you never had. So even if you wind up netting 20% on that, I would argue that's probably higher than your normal margin on your regular menu. So it is very profitable if you understand it in the right context.
I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but to your point, we have two locations in Michigan. The same operator has 2 locations in Michigan. Last week, both locations did over $10,000 in sales of just Wow Bao. If they, again, we believe it's 30 or 40% drop, but say it's 20% drop, that is a significant amount of money that they brought to the bottom line. And this whole thing about fees, I hate the fees. Every restaurant operator listening, we hate the fees. However, and I said this on the last time we met, I believe, the third-party delivery platforms saved the restaurant industry, saved it. In the last year, there's been no walk-in business. There's been no way to reach our customers without these aggregators. So you can say that I don't want to pay the fees, I don't like the fees, but you know what? They are bringing in sales that we have not had before. They are keeping money in our pockets and allowing us to hire employees and grow our business. So it is, as much as I hate the fees, it's the price of doing business. You're not paying the overhead. You're not paying, outside marketing. You're not paying 17 or 18 people in your restaurant between hosts and servers and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of upside. And the main point that you touched on and Ashley touched on and Rishi said, and that everybody has said on this call, Barry included, is that these are incremental sales. Incremental, they never existed before. So grow your business and grow those numbers and you will be thrilled with the bottom line that comes out.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. And, so of course it's natural. It's a reflex that, some of the costs are new costs. They're not, normal costs, and people find them. But I think a little bit of digging into your P&L will determine that, this is actually a really good side business, so to speak, and look, there's been a lot written lately. Last week, I think I've read 2 or 3 articles about, if you think that the virtual restaurants and adding additional concepts are going to take away or be a silver bullet for your broader business, that's the wrong impression. We got to be real about it, right? You're not going to save your business by adding 2 or 3 virtual concepts in the back, because after all, the premise is that your main business is paying the bills, right? If you're expecting that, that you've got a 5,000 square foot restaurant and you're going to save that restaurant by putting 2 or 3 virtual concepts in while your main brand goes to zero, that's an unfair expectation. But if you look at it as, oh my God, I can make a really significant amount of incremental EBITDA here by keeping my main business going and using this as an additional source of revenue and profit, it can be highly incrementally profitable and really help you a lot. That's where I think it boils down to.
And with that also is what Franklin Junction is offering. Rishi, what do you have? 12 concepts? How many concepts have you guys created?
Yeah, almost 24 now.
Okay, 24 concepts. Wow, we are working with Franklin Junction, so maybe it's 25.
Yeah, one of our biggest,
right?
Yeah,
but look, if an operator listening to this were to bring on Franklin Junction, they are going to bring you recipes that are proven out, that work, right? That you know what your food cost is going to be, the packaging, all the R&D is done. You have no cost to create a virtual brand. And think about it, if you were to create a virtual brand tomorrow, you need R&D on food, R&D on packaging, you need to do photography on your food, you need to create a story about it, you need to market it, you need to do all these pieces. So look at these fees from the third-party delivery as the price of doing business, because tomorrow you can just turn on 24, 25 brands from Franklin Junction and all the work is done for already. The amount of money that you didn't have to spend out and to have sales literally coming in your door in 48 hours from right now at this moment is so much better than spending the next 3 months trying to figure something out.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rishi.
Oh, no, I was going to add, Aziz, there's been so much growth in the delivery space over the last 12 months. And one of the questions you asked was, is it here to stay? And what we've seen over the last 2 months, at least with our restaurant data, is as storms hit Texas and the Midwest and the Northeast, delivery sales were really pinched for a couple weeks at a time. And as soon as the weather cleared up, business went back to normal, sales were bigger than normal. And so I think that those were small case studies in seeing that people are just as anxious to start ordering again. Delivery drivers will be back out there. Restaurants will be back operating. This business isn't going anywhere. If anything, it's just pent up demand, whenever it goes away for a week or two. So I think that this is here to stay. And as Jeff was saying, you got to compartmentalize your business. If you have a primary business that's, with dine-in service and pickup, that's one option. If you find a way to monetize that inventory in another way to create your own concept, that's a second concept. But are you adding something else that has brand equity in the marketplace, that has staying power, or are you doing something that's a gimmick to get a 1 or 2 week sales bump? And so that's where I think it's important to have some sort of strategy around what in the long term do we want to invest in, and do we want to put all of our eggs in one basket and then wait for 3 months of results and then start over? Or do we want to have different opportunities and different strategies for different goals?
I think that's a great point. And I think, Barry, you had given some very compelling figures last time about where this industry is going. So you kind of either get on this bandwagon or you're going to get left behind, because this industry is going in a particular direction. And I think you had mentioned what the Euromonitor had talked about, like $1 trillion in delivery food service sales or something of that nature.
Yeah, I was just actually looking at that report today for some other customers, and actually the higher number they had was actually 1.5 trillion by 2050. So again, just ridiculous in growth. And if they're half wrong, it's still enormous growth. I do want to mention, the same phenomenon with e-commerce, digital, and delivery is, as important maybe in some ways in retail, just because, we're seeing large amounts of transactions happening on digital and delivery, incredible growth. And frankly, stores are evolving really into fulfillment centers for, in many cases, delivery orders. So it's, this phenomenon that's happening in restaurants with delivery, ghost kitchens, in many ways parallels what's happening in retail. And of course, retailers are getting much more sophisticated and aggressive with meals and looking to capture meals. So I think for the operator, this dark kitchen is a wonderful opportunity, and in many of the most cases can be incremental.
And I think we didn't have time to get into this last time, but I think this could be a good segue into other benefits of restaurant e-commerce, in the sense that look, it's not lost on us that this new generation of customers is interested in the environment, is interested in saving their time for other their opportunity costs of having to go get in their car and go drive through, have their car idling there for 15 minutes, pick up food to come back in a 45-minute lunch break, versus are you going to get it delivered and you can spend that 45 minutes while you're waiting for that food, talking to family, meditating, exercising. I mean, there's so many other things you can do with your time and we get back to this need state thing that Rishi keeps talking about, right? Going out and grabbing lunch sometimes it's not the restaurant experience that you're after. You're after getting a sandwich, if that sandwich can be brought to you through a DoorDash, or whatever it is, just the opportunity cost of the time you save and turning your car on and going over there and fighting traffic and waiting in line, man, pay $5 and have it delivered to you and get an hour of your life back, So I think the new kind of customers, I mean, I look at the younger generation, they're like, man, I'm not doing it, I'm going to have it brought in. I'm not going to sit around here and go do that. So I think those are things that, actually maybe you can chime in what you're seeing trend wise, but the new generation of customers, for them, delivery is a way of life. It's not it's just what they do. It's normal for them.
Built into their budget. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what I do want to say is that, DoorDash and is really excited for dine-in to open. I think we know that like restaurants are a cornerstone of our communities. We are really sincere about wanting to empower local economies and know that a big piece of that is dine-in, and that delivery was incremental to dine-in, right? Just in the way that virtual brands can be incremental to delivery. So that's the first piece, is it's super important for dine-in to open. We're excited for people to go back into restaurants and to be enjoying meals and celebrating. I think that, certainly people are delivering more, not necessarily, again, to Aziz's point, to replace meals that they were going to eat out in, but just maybe replacing more of what they were cooking at home, right? So we think about pre-COVID. I know right now with the pandemic, people's eating habits, both in terms of delivery, what they're cooking at home is looking a little bit different. But I do think that we're seeing just an overall change in how people consume, whether it's on retail or in food. And I think this is part of it. But we do think that dine-in is still a cornerstone of what we want restaurants to be, and that we're building on top of this, right? Like you can build, as Rishi mentioned, you want to invest and think about, like, you're not trying to do a quick one and done with virtual brands. You are trying to maybe build a sustainable revenue flow that lets you focus more on your dine-in experience. I think that's, if you can bring in some additional funds to the bottom line through something like Wow Bao or through one of Franklin Junction's brand, then you're able to think about, okay, let's focus more of our energy here on the dine-in experience, on maybe how we can test new concepts through some of these virtual brands, get consumer feedback. I think that all of it can work together in a way that's really great for restaurants.
Yeah, I agree. I don't, the restaurant experience is the restaurant experience. I think what we're all saying in our different ways is that there are new need states, which, delivery helps to fulfill, that are incremental. They just are, and I don't believe that dine-in or restaurant sales are necessarily going to go down. If anything, post-pandemic, I think they're going to go up in a big way, but I think delivery will be an incremental part of the business. So here's an interesting question, which is the contrary one. What would it take for restaurants to beat you? What would restaurants have to do to succeed without delivery, without ghost kitchens, etc.? So who wants to take the first crack at that one?
One thing, I mean, if you look at Asia and the restaurants that are thriving there, that aren't in the delivery space, they're crushing it with the experience. So if your restaurant is just an unbelievable experience end to end, clearly that's going to drive, to get you out of the house and functionally to get you there. And certainly when you look at the research with Gen Z, especially Gen Z, and asking them motivators to go shopping or motivators to go to a restaurant, experience is way at the top. And it's a different type of experience than some of us that are older grew up with, because they're not going to be in Macy's on an escalator going shopping or to a restaurant. It's just going to be a winning experience is going to be way at the top there.
I'll join in on this question here, this thought question. I think what's important is this isn't a competition. No one's trying to beat anybody. I'm a restaurant operator. I've been doing restaurants for 30 years, 30 plus years. And I have 5 brick and mortar stores in Chicago. They just announced today we're going to get to 50% capacity, or 100 people, whichever is less, starting the next 24 hours or so, thank God. So it's not about beating us. One thing that I've learned is whenever the crisis hits, whatever the crisis is, now it's the pandemic, we've gone through 2008, we've gone through terrible times, the hospitality industry gets hit harder than anybody. But what happens during these times is we are entrepreneurs, and we evolve and we innovate, and we come out of the pandemic or the crisis better than the restaurant industry went into it. The hospitality industry went into it. So this is just more evolution and innovation. This is another layer of how the restaurant industry is responding to a difficult time. We are creating a new business, a new revenue stream, a new angle to go for. We're not trying to combat with the restaurant industry. I'm a restaurant operator. In the last 12 months or 11 months, I've had to close stores or not have people in my restaurants. I had to find ways to keep the lights turned on. We found a way, and we have found a way to help other restaurants succeed. Do I think this will continue? Absolutely. Barry said it's going to be $1.5 trillion. $1 trillion by 2030 is what they're saying. And again, to your point, the best comment of this whole thing is, if they're wrong on their projection by 50%, it's still $500 billion industry. This is strictly a way for us to evolve and find sales and be successful for ourselves and for our restaurant partners. That's what we are doing. It's not competition.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think that, you have a choice. You don't have to participate. If you're listening to what the panel is saying here, this is incremental business. This is a direction that consumers are going. And there were a lot of brands, for example, that did not participate in the Amazon revolution. They said that we're not going to make our products available online for whatever good reason that they had, and they didn't. Some of them came along many years later and said, okay, we're ready to do it that way. And there are still some products that, may or may not be available online because they feel that, they don't want to participate in that. So If you've got a restaurant that can hardly keep your, you've got 2 hour wait, every hour of every day, one would argue, yeah, you probably don't need to take on anything more. You don't need to get into the delivery business because you're so busy that you don't want to do it. But if you've got extra capacity, if you're looking for incremental sales, if you want to satisfy a customer that wants delivery at this moment, they don't really want to come in right now, you participate. So I agree, Jeff. It's not a competition. If anything, this is an additional revenue source, an additional avenue, right?
I come from the world. I want more sales.
Yeah.
So yeah, I might have an hour wait every hour of every day. I still want more sales.
Sure.
Yeah, one thing that I take a little personally is the idea that all of this revenue is going somewhere else, or that the labor is being outsourced. When you order delivery, you're still supporting companies in your neighborhood. They're the same people that would otherwise be working in restaurants, own restaurants, invest restaurants. Your servers have become delivery drivers. They're the same people. When you go to a restaurant and buy a meal and tip 20%, or if you pay 20% on delivery to pay for a driver's wages, those are the same things. And those are still people in your community that you're supporting. So I think it's really important to realize that it's just a change to how we consume the food itself. But that cycle of the dollar is still staying in your community for the most part, and you are promoting local business by doing it.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a fantastic point. Someone has put in the chat box, it's open to all. As a consumer, even when things go back to normal, I would still order meals on these apps because it's simply convenient. I think right there it says it all. I mean, it's a new need state. Perhaps COVID, as we talked about last time, accelerated. I know our family was not huge on delivery pre-COVID. COVID forced us into exploring more on delivery, and we're not going to go back. I mean, we have discovered a level of convenience and choice there that just works for us on occasions where cooking is not convenient or going out is not convenient. So it is a new need state for us as well. So I think that that's the way most people look at it. Barry, you put a really great comment on there that the next billion-dollar food brand will be incubated in part via dark kitchens, and I actually mentioned that what a wonderful channel this is, a low capex way of testing an idea and putting it out there and seeing if there's consumer demand without having to raise millions of dollars and build bricks and mortar. Go out there and give it your best shot, and if it works, then maybe go invest in bricks and mortar on the back end and do it then. So this is a testing ground, and for the consumer, so much more choice. They're getting a lot more choices here. So it's fantastic. It's great. So someone has asked about whether this recording will be available, and Janine, our technical moderator here, has noted that it will, and it will be available to participants later. Another question has come in that one of the key challenges with delivery is loss of control of the consumer experience. What best practices can restaurants employ to improve the customer experience and avoid finger pointing for mistakes? So Ashley, this seems like a natural one to go to you, because you're right, DoorDash is in the front lines of this. What do you have to say about this?
Yeah, so I think that Jeff had mentioned kind of operations being a crucial part of this. I think that is something that is really important on ensuring that the consumer experience is a great one. So before, I think maybe you had you would take your food, you would package it up, you would leave it on the counter and let a dasher or someone come and pick it up. I think really thinking about optimizing for that delivery experience is something that we've seen a big shift in. So on a couple of different vectors. The first one's on packaging, thinking about, okay, everyone has like the classic fries challenge, where how do you keep fries from, even if it's a really short delivery distance, can you put a piece of parchment paper in it? Can you think about venting your packaging? Can you use different packaging? I've seen some amazing things in the packaging space as we've helped restaurants launch delivery only concepts around boxes that help keep everything a little bit more stable, techniques in like foil wrapping that have helped keep temperature control. So that's one vector. The second piece is on making sure that your store is set up that it's easy and clear for dashers, or for any any courier that's coming through and doing pickup. So that's checking your store settings. Do you have clear directions? I just went dashing last night, and it was great to see all the stores they went to had super clear directions, like, hey, the pickup window is to the left if you are just ring the bell and someone will come out with the food and have the order name ready. So making sure that your store is set up for that. And then not forgetting like the importance, especially with virtual brands, of both that in-app experience with the directions, but also making sure that it's clear with some sort of signage. So something that I see a lot, it's like very, very logical when you think about it, is a restaurant that I work with is open 2 hours later with just the virtual brand because they just have a smaller staff to support it. But the close sign, they don't have a clear open sign that they are open past those hours, and they don't have any signage out in front for their virtual concept. Obviously that's pretty confusing for someone who's trying to pick up food. So remembering that experience, even though it's a virtual brand in the app, that there's still a real life element, getting signage on your door, making sure your hours reflect that. And then just the last piece too is that optimization, right? Like, are your prep times accurate? Are you confirming orders when they come in so that dispatch can come at the right time? Those are all critical pieces in making sure that, you're setting it up for a great pickup experience and getting to the customer on time. And for us as DoorDash, we're continuing to refine and optimize our product to make sure that we are timing it, that, the pin for where a Dasher comes is really accurate. So I think it's both sides there.
And I just want to add on to that, as an entrepreneur, as a restaurateur, I want to bring the experience home to the guest, right? You came to our restaurant expecting a certain level of service or entertainment or comfort or whatever the word may be. You can bring that home to your customers, even though there's an intermediary with that third-party delivery service. You can write a special note on the bag. You can include a thank you note in the order. You could say the order was packaged by so-and-so. Please let us know if you have any comments. You can reach out to people. You could still make that dining experience at that person's home special for that person. You could throw in a small dessert for free. You can, there was times in the early days when toilet paper was a big thing during the beginning of the pandemic. People were putting rolls of toilet paper into the delivery, whether it's tongue-in-cheek joke or to do something. We are in the hospitality business, and we know hospitality better than anybody. Just because the guest is not in your four walls doesn't mean you can't bring hospitality to the guest.
Now that's a good point. And I think that, there's a fundamental, the golden rule. The delivery driver is your customer, man, if you're in the virtual space, right? You're not going to see your end customer. You're seeing the delivery driver. So how do you treat that driver? So to Ashley's point about convenience of the driver when they're there, right? The dasher in your case is what you call them. But your relationship with your extended team here, which is the driving team, right? That's bringing the food, taking the time to explain to them what you got. If there's something that's, a little bit sensitive in the bag, to point that out to them that, you may want to take a little bit more care with this particular package, et cetera. I think that goes a long way in how you treat, your driver partners. And Rishi, you had mentioned, I can't remember, I think it was on the last one, that part of Franklin Junction's curation of brands, the brands that you bring on board, definitely has something to do with packaging and how you feel that particular product is going to get to the end user. Can you talk about, some of those decisions you make on the platform side about who you take on and what role packaging plays?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ashley mentioned a lot of the features we look at, the ability to contain heat and vent steam. Tamper-proof is going to be a big thing for this year. I believe by the end of the year, that's almost going to be a requirement in a lot of places, and it should be. A lot of the security that's around people's food, I think, is important, as is going to take center stage. So that's a big focus for us, is developing some tamper-proof packaging. But as we look around the world, delivery is not new. Deliveries exist in other places, and there's markets that are mature with this. And I think what we have to do is bring those products over here. So I just dropped a message in the chat box about how, what Ashley was saying, and then you piggybacked on, is that every item just does not translate well to delivery. And the same fundamentals that you go through in scrutinizing a menu and the delivery of your product and service within the stores, you have to put that same hat on and scrutinize whether these items and how they're delivered they stand up to the standards of your brand. And so it's important to maybe consider all of those reasons before you launch an online menu.
And it's all about repeat sales, right? I mean, early on when delivery was a bit novel, when DoorDash and others were just getting started, I think people were a little bit more, how should I say it, lenient. And it was so, it was so great to get your favorite food delivered to home because you only had pizza or, a couple options prior. I think as time goes on, if you want repeat customers, man, you better get, it's going to be the best will always win as usual. Those brands that are able to adapt, make their packaging really good, make the food get there in a presentable way, etc., are going to get more repeat customers. And those are the brands that are going to thrive. So like anything else, if you do a half-hearted attempt at this, you're going to get, maybe you'll get some trial in the beginning, but you're not going to get the repeat business because people say this sucks, and we're not, it doesn't, I'm paying a lot of money and it's not coming the way I want. So it would behoove brands that really want to make money here to invest the time in packaging. And I think we talked a little bit last time about packaging was one of the last things to evolve in delivery because, brands were not willing to make the investment they were using the to-go packaging on delivery. And I think food service experts will tell you that there's a difference, right? You may say, well, what difference does it make? It does make a difference whether a driver is taking that to the home or the consumer is picking it up themselves. There's one more person in the chain, in the custody chain here. When you pick up your own food and you spill it, yeah, you could blame the restaurant a little bit, but you also might have to blame yourself on the way you put it in your back seat or how you did it. You got to keep in mind that this is being delivered by a third party, and so the packaging has to be a little bit more robust to take into account of the time it takes for them to get from point A to point B, and the consumer is going to be sort of less tolerant of the fact that the food was not presented in a good way. So I think this is just sort of like Jeff said, it's part of business, man. You gotta invest in the packaging and make sure. So there is another question that came in, a bit of a interesting question about the intersection of $15 minimum wage and virtual restaurants, and whether the panel feels that there is anything there either will accelerate virtual restaurants or not. Does anyone have an opinion on whether the minimum wage is going to have an impact here in one way or the other?
Well, with drive automation, there's no question about it. Already seeing it, seeing it across industries, and fast food, the restaurant industry would be one of the industries at the forefront. So when you're paying, humans that kind of wage, it can be a problem for the operator, pushes them more towards automation, and obviously we're seeing a lot of that playing out now.
Yeah.
My concern is always with the one size fits all. What works in an urban center just does not work in rural areas. You're going to drive, by having a one size fits all policy, you're really going to make food deserts, even bigger deserts, and it's a sad thing to see. So I think different policies maybe should be locally governed there.
I think one other thought that should be considered is, I've worked at very large restaurants where you might have the saute guy versus the grill guy versus the fry guy versus the salad guy work on the line. And if you think about it, the salad guy is just making salads. And on your menu, you might only have 4 or 5 salads. And on your grill guy, he's making steaks and burgers, and that's all that person makes. If you can put it on a second concept that each of those positions picks up one item, it's 0 increase of labor, but it's an incredible revenue stream. And that's how I think people need to look at it. Your salad guy, probably your kitchen's not set up, but your salad person is going to also become your saute person, because the cold line and the hot line don't go. So you can't decrease labor, but you can increase those items that those cooks make by bringing on a different concept, because you can't put any more food on your existing menu. But by giving them all more responsibility, that's a way to beat this minimum wage effect, getting more productivity out of them without them even realizing they're doing more work.
If I understand Ashley, do you want to say anything on this topic? Do you have anything to add?
No, I think the team here covered it. So
I would say, if I interpret the question correctly, will minimum wage increases have a impact on virtual restaurants? And I would say the answer is 100% yes, because it's what Jeff said. If the cost of labor goes up, you'll be more interested in higher productivity. And one way to get higher productivity is to increase your offerings without necessarily having to increase labor. So the pure economic model of that, as Barry said, you're going to try to beat it with automation. and you're going to try to beat it with trying to get more out of your employees, so there's even less, lag time where they're not 100% productive, because now you're paying, maybe 50% more for that labor. So I do think that it will have a more of a acceleration trend on the virtual side, as people say, well, what else can I do then? If I have to pay more, is there any way to make my employees more productive, so that the little bit of, whatever slag or downtime I had before, which I was willing to tolerate at the lower price point, but I can't tolerate that anymore. So what can I do to get more productivity? And so that should add to the demand for additional menu items, which would translate to more business for virtual restaurants, I think.
And one other thing we all know as restaurant people, sales solve all the problems.
Sure.
The more sales you have, your food cost is better, your payroll's better, your rent's easier. Sales fixes everything. And what I've learned in my many years is you can only get so many people coming into your restaurant. And when I say that, that's whether it's dine-in, carry-out, or delivery. By adding a second, third, fourth brand, you have now created more business. And sales will solve the only way to, none of us can stop the 15 minimum wage whenever it's going to hit us. And then, by the way, it's going to go up again one day.
Yeah.
The only answer is to increase sales. And I challenge you, because there was a thought question here earlier that was challenging this panel, is to go back and say, how are you going to increase your sales?
Yeah.
We created a way to increase sales by giving operators another revenue stream.
And Rishi, this is something that you had brought up on the last time about, sort of the spectrum of revenues, and how, even restaurants of a single brand, if they have 100 restaurants, they don't have equivalent sales across the chain, but the size of the building is the same. That means they,
Right.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that, which is sort of the reality of bricks and mortar, is that you often have excess capacity, even though you don't necessarily fill it every time.
Yeah, I think it's a scaled approach, right? So when you evaluate your system-wide sales and you look at what your store sales there's some compartmentalization to the strategy. Maybe your highest earning stores are operating at 90% efficiency, so they can add one concept that can drive 10% efficiency and get you to 100. Maybe you have stores that are at 80% of optimization. They can add two concepts, 70% can add three, so I think there's ways that you can scale what level of involvement you want in the delivery only space. Another thing I see is that there's brands that want to launch their own virtual brands. And I think that is mutually exclusive from bringing in other brands that are adding something new to the delivery area. So what is the positioning there? Are you bringing maybe a new ethnic cuisine, a different price point, a better quality, something more attractive to offer? So again, I think that there's varying levels of strategies that can be taken on to make sure that you're maximizing your infrastructure across the entire portfolio.
Yeah, before I launched NRD Capital, and I was a franchisee, and I was a multi-unit franchisee of several brands. And one of the things that always struck me was, in some cases I'd have 30 or 40 units of a particular brand, and the size of the unit, the build would be the same, because that was the brand standard. It's going to be 3,000 square feet. It's going to be oriented this way. Didn't matter where it was, right? That was the brand standard. You look at McDonald's, you look at anything, you have a certain brand standard. But when I looked at my sales, in some cases, I'd have my top 10% of my units doing $2 or $3 million AUV, and my bottom 10% units doing $1 million. But the building and the cost was exactly the same. And it was always a question of, I spent the same amount of money building this $1 million unit and this $3 million unit. Now, how do I get this unit to perform as well as this unit? And before virtual restaurants came along, you're kind of stuck. I mean, luck of the draw, you did all the homework you could and all the, background screening and site optimization work, but the end of the day was across the board, you did not have uniform sales. Some locations just performed better, and other locations lagged, and the good locations always subsidized the bad locations, so to speak, right? Your higher volume units where you made more money were paying for your lower units that were not making as more money, but you're committed to all of them because you built them, you have mortgages, you've signed leases, right? With virtual restaurants, there's actually an opportunity to take your lower volume units and without any CapEx, increase their volumes to bring them up to potential. So if I was still a franchisee today, I would go to my $3 million unit and say, thanks a lot, Jeff and Rishi, are not interested. I'm doing just fine I don't need an extra dollar of sales. I don't want to do anything because this unit is kicking ass. But what can you do for me on these $1 million units?
Yeah.
Is there something you can do for me here that I can raise my sales by 20 or 25%? By the way, bringing the profitability of those units equivalent to my $3 million unit because of the incremental nature of virtual restaurants. So I think that, you know, this is such a, again, I can't believe the time. It's 2:56. We've burned through another hour again, and it feels like we could keep going forever. But I think once again, the conclusion is the same. We got to it a different way, is that this is for real. It's going to be a fantastic, you know, time in the next few years, exciting time in the restaurant business, new technology, new options. Everyone wins, you know, operators win, they have more sales, consumer wins, they have more choice. You know, it's a wonderful way, enabled by, you know, incredible technology from the likes of DoorDash, and just, you know, just a wonderful, I think, next few years of evolution. So once again, I'd like to really thank all the panelists for your time today, and getting back together again. And maybe actually we'll bring the band back together again if there's even more demand in the future. But thank you to all the listeners and all the questions that came in. We've really enjoyed having you, and wish you a great rest of the day and much success in your businesses. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you all.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.